The Interested Reader podcast is about exploring the world beyond the textbook. We'll cover many lessons in math, physics, and astronomy, and then delve into the mysteries of the universe. Physics is fun, people just don't know it, and I want to change that. I want to spark your curiosity about the world around you and ignite your passion for exploring and questioning. I'm your host, Sarah Tyke. Come with me and let's take a random walk into the world reserved for the interested reader. Hey everyone, Sarah here. On this episode of the Interested Reader podcast, I want to start with just a brief mathematical lesson on limits. I'm not going to go into the whole idea of solving them and applying them to functions and equations and getting into that sort of mess right now. What I want to do is just basically talk about the two limiting cases of 0 and infinity, because I like to kind of apply those to my personal life as well. So when we talk about limits, it's going to be written as something like this, of some function. So we have our limit as x approaches infinity, or 0, or 1, or 2, or whatever that number is going to be, of your function is equal to L, which is your limit, your solution. So I often look at the cases of the limit as x approaches 0, and the limit as x approaches infinity. And it's kind of like with unit analysis, where I was using that as just a quick way to see if the equation came out correct. I use limits to kind of check the answer to make sure that it's doing what we expect it to do at 0 and infinity. So suppose we have a graph just a simple graph like that, our standard straight line equation. So as x approaches infinity, as x gets larger, if this number here, that goes to infinity, as x gets bigger, y gets bigger, and that's exactly what we see in the graph here. If x goes to 0, as x gets smaller, we know that y gets smaller, and we see that here too. So we know that in those cases, we see that equation is correct. We can see on the graph that that's exactly what happens. Similarly, if you have a graph of something that's, shaped like that, we have our basically our y equals x squared. Same sort of thing. You see as x goes to infinity, y shoots up very fast. As x comes to 0, we come down and we approach 0 that way. And so you can kind of look at whenever you have equations, you kind of look and see if you have the right idea. For example, a force, the gravitational force, electromagnetic forces, are inverse square laws. So the force is proportional to the inverse square when r is your distance from the center of the source. So, for example, if r was our distance from the center of the Earth, as r gets bigger, we see that force, as r here gets bigger, force tends to 0. So the farther from Earth's surface, the less that gravitational force is. Same thing with electromagnetism. If r is your distance from your source, the farther away from your source, as r goes to infinity here, your force goes to 0. So the farther you are from, say, some magnetic source, that magnetic pull weakens, it goes to 0 as you get farther away from it. And all that makes sense. So you can just put in 0 and infinity, make sure your equation is making sense, that it's behaving the way it should. If r were to come to 0, force would skyrocket. So we see that basically as the closer you get to your source, your gravity source, your magnetic source, as r tends to 0, f tends to infinity. As r tends to infinity, f tends towards 0. So those are just ways to kind of check your equations to make sure that they're making sense in just those sort of limiting cases. And I like to think of basically tending towards 0 as your worst case scenario and tending toward infinity as your best case scenario. So I'm often looking at situations and thinking, well, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst that can happen? What happens if this situation tends towards 0? Conversely, what's the best that could happen? What would happen if this tended toward infinity. And they're just kind of fun ways to ponder situations in life, as well as to test your functions and make sure that they're behaving properly. I hope you got something out of this brief math lesson. If you want more information on limits and how to solve them, let me know, and we can get into actually solving limits and equations and all that stuff. But this is the main thing I wanted to discuss today, was just using these two limiting cases just to test the behavior of functions, test out your limits in life. What's the best case that could happen? What's the worst case that could happen? Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. So we did a little bit of mathematical limits, and now I just want to share a couple examples of my personal limits. A couple months ago, I was at a doctor's appointment for my son, just a wellness checkup, and the nurse and I just got to talking about various things, and she asked if we go to church, and I said we didn't, and she invited me to just a get-together at her church among just a few women. There was going to be a women's only thing, no children, no husbands, and it sounded like it would be fun. I was kind of looking to get out of the house and meet some new people, but it was on a Saturday, and I work Saturdays, and I was kind of hesitant. I was like, I don't know. It's not really something I do. She gave me a little registration card so I could sign up if I changed my mind. And I kept thinking about it, and I really wanted to go because I really wanted to just meet some other people just to get out. But it was so uncomfortable for me. This is so far beyond what I normally do. I don't go out to social events, especially when it's just a bunch of strangers that I've never met, especially for a church thing that I don't go to the church. I'm not part of that group. And my husband and I have been married for 17 years, and we've rarely been apart for those 17 years. We do everything together. For the past 8 or 9 years, we've worked at the same company. For like the past 5 years, we've been in the same department on the same shift. So we do everything together. And I love that. So for me to go to a group event by myself, that's unheard of. It was terrifying. But I felt like I should go. Like, this is something I really should try to do. So I registered for it. I took a day off of work. I signed up for it. My name's on their list. They're expecting me. The Saturday is when it was being held. Saturday comes around, and it's very rainy and drizzly that day. And I was kind of secretly hoping that they would just cancel it because it's an outdoor event. I was kind of hoping that, maybe they won't actually hold it. And so I was kind of hoping they wouldn't do it. And I started thinking about the limiting cases. So what's the worst that could happen? I go to this thing, don't know anybody. I just sit there. There was going to be some live music, so maybe I just sit there, I listen to music for a couple hours, and then I go home. And then the rest of the day that I took off of work, I get to spend with my husband and my son. So for a worst case scenario, that's not that bad. And the other limiting case, what's the best that could happen, was that I go out, I meet some people, I make friends, it's a fun time, and I really enjoy myself. And that is something that I'm thinking I almost can't afford not to do it, if that's the best that could happen. I mean, the worst case scenario is I just basically listen to some music and spend the day with my husband. That's a pretty good day. So I'm sitting here hoping that it gets canceled because of the rain, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know. Kind of hope they don't, kind of hope they do. And it's kind of getting up to the time when the event's about to start. It's a local thing, so it's not very far away. And then I get the email. The event coordinator is like, hey, rain or shine, we're still doing it. We found a shelter. The rain's no big deal. And I was my heart saying just a little bit because now I have to go. My name's on the list. I can't use weather as the excuse. I have to go. So my husband's driving me over there because he's going to drop me off and then go into town with our son, do some errands. And on the way, there's a car that's pulled over on the side of the road. This is kind of a backwoods road here in rural Iowa. Not a lot of people driving out here. As we're passing, the driver flags us down and asks if we've seen or if we know of this particular house in the area It's a couple, him and his wife from Florida, and they're looking for their great grandmother's house that's supposed to be in this area. They have this beautiful picture of this old, Victorian era house. And of course, I'm fairly new to this area, so I don't know. And just kind of out of nowhere, I tell them, well, we're going to a church event. Why don't you come with us and see if these people know anything about it? So here I'm going to this person's house. I don't even know the host who's hosting this thing. The nurse at the clinic invited me to it, but I don't know if she's the host. And honestly, I don't even know her name at this point. And here I'm just inviting these strangers I meet on the road. Hey, let's just come with us and we'll see if these people have any information for you. So we get there and this guy greets me. He's the owner of the house. Is actually the husband of the nurse who invited me. And so, we meet and introduce ourselves and I'm like, oh, by the way, I met these two people on the side of the road. Maybe you can help them. And it turns out the guy thought he probably knew the house. Unfortunately, it had been torn down a couple years earlier. But yeah, everyone was really helpful and they helped this couple out and kind of talked to them about the area and where they thought the house may have been. And so that was kind of cool. And the other thing I'm really nervous about at this point is the fact that I don't know this nurse's name. I've seen her a few times, for my son's checkups. So I'm just here at this house, like, I don't know anyone. The woman who invited me, I recognize her, but I don't know her name. So I see her and she comes over to me and I was just like, I'm so embarrassed, but I don't know your name. And that was hard for me to admit that too. And then she introduced herself, gives me her name, and she says, I don't know your name either. I saw your last name on the registration list and I recognized it, and I know your son's name, but I didn't know your name. So that was kind of a relief that I'm not the only one who doesn't get people's names. And the whole big thing that I was worried about this whole time turned out to be nothing, and she didn't know my name either. And we just laughed about it and had a really good time. And the rest of the event was just a lot of fun. So I was so glad that I went. I was so glad that I got past that limiting idea of this isn't something that I do. It's going to be weird. It's going to be awkward. I don't know her name. This just isn't me. I got past all that. I did it, and it was so much fun. I'm so glad I did. Now, around the same time, I was looking for just some sort of like a part-time work-from-home job, just something to do with my spare time. And I found one online that I really liked. This company that was posting it had several different positions. One of them I really, really wanted, and it sounded like it'd be so much fun. Is actually, they described it as being perfect for high school students. And I'm thinking, or, 43-year-old women who have a bunch of spare time because they have a baby at home. And I went to apply for it. I had my cover letter all ready. By the time I actually got to the application, it had been closed. So that was disappointing. They had another one that I didn't really meet the qualifications for. They wanted you to have a website or some sort of portfolio of artwork or something that you do, and I don't have any of that. So they had a third one that didn't sound exactly what I wanted, and I didn't meet all the qualifications, but I figured it's close enough. I might as well give it a shot. So I try out for that position, send in my application. A few weeks later, I actually hear back from them. They say, hey, we really liked your application. We want you to move on to round 2. And I was so excited because I thought, if nothing else, maybe I start working for this company and I can get one of the other positions that I really wanted later on. And it just sounded like it'd be at least something fun to do. So I'm reading through the description for round 2, and you basically have to put together a marketing proposal and describe what kind of market research techniques are you going to use, and how are you going to analyze the data, and what would that data tell you. And the whole goal is to come up with a strategy or a plan to get this company into a new market area. And I basically don't know what any of those words are. So I'm thinking, well, okay, I can search it out on the internet. I can maybe put together something. And then the next step is where my heart just sinks, because it says, make a 2-minute recording of your process. So they want me to put my voice on camera and record what I'm doing on the computer to research this marketing proposal. And my immediate reaction was, I can't do it. Not going to do it. I even texted my husband at work and said, well, I guess I'm not going to finish that application because I can't do a recording. I'm not going to put my voice on camera. That would be ridiculous. That's not what I do. Also, keep in mind that I love public speaking and I love teaching. I hate being on camera. I hate my voice being recorded. And I was just sat there and I just thought, how disappointing is it that I can't even finish the application? So I'm thinking, again, limiting cases. What's the worst that happens? I make a complete fool of myself. These people at this company maybe laugh at me because I have totally missed the mark with the application. Maybe they really laugh at my voice because it sounds terrible. I mean, so what? I will never see these people. I don't get the job. I'm not in any worse position than I am right now if I don't get that job. It was just for fun. So if I don't do it, I'm right where I started. If I do it and don't get the job, worst case scenario, I'm right where I started. But on the other limit, what's the best that could happen? Maybe I get the job. Maybe it's something that I love doing and I actually enjoy work and I enjoy a job. Maybe even I can go full time with it. That's a pretty good deal, I think. The worst case scenario is basically nothing. The best case scenario is everything. And I really didn't want to give up. I sat there thinking, I don't want to just give up. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. In the application, they had recommended a software package that I could use to make just a quick screen recording of what I was doing. They didn't want anything professional. So I just did it. I went through my process. I recorded it. It was supposed to be no more than 2 minutes. The first time around, 2 minutes. It was perfect. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to send it off. But I listened to it. And in the background, you can hear my son crying pretty loudly. I didn't think that my microphone was good enough to pick it up. I thought that I was good. So now I have to redo it because at this point I can't edit audio to take out that background noise. So I tried again. And every time I try again, it's like a 4-minute video and they only want 2 minutes. So now I'm kind of in this mode where I actually enjoy making this video, this recording, but it's taking me too long. I'm putting too much information. I'm starting to run off at the mouth and just go in all these different directions. So finally, after I don't know how many takes, I finally get down to the 2-minute mark. I send it off to them, and it was the best feeling ever because I completed it. I didn't really expect to get the job. I didn't get the job. I just found out a couple weeks ago. But it didn't even matter because the success was that I completed the application, that I did something that I was so uncomfortable with. I really did not want to do that. But I did it, and it was actually a lot of fun. And around this time, I was listening to a podcaster who very much advocates for everybody to have their own podcast. And I always thought, no, I can't do it because I can't have my voice recorded. That is ridiculous. But after doing this application where I was essentially forced to do it, found out I liked it. And then I thought, well, if I can do it for a 2-minute recording, why not do it for a podcast? So here I am, trying my hand at podcasting, not caring what I sound like on video or audio. So it turned out to be a really good thing. These limiting cases are, I think, good ways to really kind of put things in perspective because most of the time, the worst thing that happens is not even that bad. And pretty much you end up right where you started. And then the best case scenario is usually something amazing and awesome that you almost can't afford not to do. You have to try these things that push yourself outside of your comfort zone. And again, I didn't get the job, but man, I was so happy that I even finished that application. That was basically as good as getting the job in my mind. So just remember, keep pushing past your limits. And I hope you got something out of this. And I can't wait to talk to you guys again. Bye. Hey, Sarah here. I just wanted to share a quote about limits that I didn't have on hand when I was doing the other recording. And it's one of my favorite quotes. And it is by Wayne Dyer. And he says, "The only limits you have are the limits you believe. And I really want you guys to try to take that to heart, because you're the only one probably telling yourself you can't do something. So just make sure that you don't miss out on something because you believe you can't do it. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode and are inspired to question and investigate the world around you. Let me know what you're thinking about. You can contact me through the website, theinterestedreader.com, send me an email at sarah@theinterestedreader.com, or join the Interested Reader group on Facebook. I'll see you at some later time T, where T is greater than T naught, and T naught is equal to now. Thanks for being an interested reader, and I'll see you next time.